I try to read widely. And we had been subscribers to the New York Times since we were in college. And we are still. Back when we were in college, I don't remember ever being mentioned in the New York Times. Do you remember being mentioned in the New York Times?
I don't think it happened.
Yeah. Well, that changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that has changed.
Okay, so you can show my screen here, Zach. We're going to go back and forth a few times. Here this week, this is from February 9th, so what is that, 2 days ago? Steve Bannon's podcast is top misinformation spreader, study says. A large podcast study found that Mr. Bannon's War Room had more falsehoods and unsubstantiated claims than other political talk shows. And they've got an unattractive picture of Steve Bannon because of course they do. Because of course that's what they do here. Steve Bannon's War Room podcast topped the Brookings Institution's list of political talk shows airing false, misleading, and unsubstantiated claims. They've got they looked at a lot of podcasts, and the top 10 sources of misinformation were War Room, the Charlie Kirk Show, the Rush Limbaugh Show, the Michael Savage Show, and Brett Weinstein DarkHorse Podcast.
My God.
Remarkable.
Yeah, that is remarkable.
Remarkable. Okay, so what the actual fuck? I mean, really, that's about where I land. But this is based on a report from the Brookings Institute. Okay, and do not show my screen yet, Zachary. I lost the section that I was at, unfortunately. Brookings, which is a think tank, did this research on podcasts and their content. And they call this research Audible Reckoning, How Top Political Podcasters Spread Unsubstantiated and False Claims. And they say, for instance, that... Go on.
So let me just say, when I first encountered this, a friend alerted me to the fact that that we had been mentioned in the Times in this regard. And I was unaware of it, and I went looking, and it's the Brookings Institution has done a study. And my immediate reaction was, well, I know where the bodies are buried, because in order to make such an assessment, you would need a method. And no method is actually conceivable here. There's no method you could justify, because what they're claiming to assess is the veracity of claims made, but what they are going to be talking about are claims in which what is true is in contention.
Well, and this is exactly what I was just trying to find, which I had it set up, but it disappeared on me. But you can now show, Zachary. This is, cataloging unsubstantiated and false claims. How'd they do it? What was their method? Reading from the Brookings Institution research. In addition to systematically limiting the podcast series examined in this analysis, it was also important to restrict the number of unsubstantiated and false claims searched for across podcast episode transcripts, because, there's just so many. To do this, the research relied on claims compiled in two different ways. The first was the text of claims or statements fact-checked as false by either PolitiFact or Snopes, two independent fact-checking organizations whose fact checks are widely relied upon by the public and members of the media and academia as credible and well-substantiated. Are they? Now, my very first natural selections piece, which I called Fact Checkers Aren't Scientists, went through, at that point, that was in July of 2021, went through a number of things that PolitiFact had claimed were not just wrong, but egregious. Their rating system goes from totally true to literally, they call it liar, liar, pants on fire. They called a couple of the things that you had claimed or Dr. Malone had claimed in the podcast that you did with Dr. Malone and Steve Kirsch as liar, liar, pants on fire level wrong, which then months later, at the point that someone had decided to actually reconcile the facts with the facts, went, oops, not only not wrong or egregious, but actually right. They just quietly, silently switched it and didn't say anything. No public reckoning, no nothing, right? So PolitiFact is, Brookings says, widely relied upon by the public and members of the media and academia as credible and well substantiated. Yeah, as is the CDC, as is the FDA, as is the WHO, as are all of these institutions which time and time and time again during the pandemic have, by us and some other people, been effectively checked. Using what? Using the tools of science. And, my God. So let's just show a couple more things here. This is figure 12 from the Brookings report. Unsubstantiated or false claims about alternative treatments and prevention were more common than all other categories combined. Oh, there we go. So they found that, even conspiracies, I don't even know what that is, right? Like conspiracies showed up almost, a quarter of the time as discussion of alternative treatments and prevention, or vaccine efficacy and side effects, disease severity, government policy response, testing. Now, it was alternative treatments and prevention that was the biggest source of misinformation, apparently, during the COVID. Yeah, let's do that. During the COVID, by podcasters who are, waving around their credentials like us. And which ones are those again? Now, you talked about some of this last week, and we talked about this a lot over the last several years, but things like, oh yes, the Voldemort of alternative treatments, ivermectin, which does work and is safe. And still, I'm finding pieces in the New York Times claiming that it's not only not effective, but not safe. This is a drug that's been on the list, the WHO's list of essential medicines, for a long time. If it weren't safe, it wouldn't be there. It is safe. It has been demonstrated over and over and over again to be effective. The first moment that we started talking about it, we already knew it was safe. Was it effective? Seemed probably so, maybe, unsure. The evidence has just gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. And this discussion right now is going to increase our ranking in a future piece of research by the Brookings Institution in terms of the amount of misinformation that we are engaging in.
So let us agree that the structure here is for, let's work backwards. You've got a news report saying, okay, we've got a misinformation problem. That news report is based on research. Okay, research. The research was done by the Brookings Institution. Oh, the research had a method. The method involved looking shit up on Snopes and PolitiFact, nakedly political, right?
Yep.
Snopes may not have been at the beginning, but now nakedly political. And so the point is, you're reading the New York Times and you're seeing that, in fact, there's a misinformation problem. And if you chase it all the way back to how you would know, there's no there.
Yep.
Now, I do remember, and I stared at it for a goodly long time, because of course, when I looked at it, I'm like, look, they've just described that they've done research for which no conceivable method could exist. So I'm going to go look at the method, and my prediction is there won't be one that is in any remote way valid, because there can't be, right? So, okay, PolitiFact and Snopes, let's call me right, there was no method.
Yes.
And then they invoke some mysterious dictionary that has terminology that would tell you. They might as well invoke a crystal ball, right? This is just simply...
Or, really, they're the ones claiming the mantle of science? A text that no one is allowed to see is the arbiter of truth?
Right. And so the point is, look, you can even do science on what they're doing, right? Oh, here's a claim. I bet it's garbage. Prediction. There won't be a method. Let's go look at the method, because they claim there is one. Oh, it's looking stuff up on PolitiFact and Snopes and some dictionary they don't share. No method, as predicted, right? Science even works on this stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's
not that they would know.
Not that they don't care.
I also think they don't know. I think that's part of what's going on. I think that's part of why, part of what we did in the classroom for 15 years, and part of what we've been doing in the podcast is saying, you know what? You can science this stuff. You can apply scientific thinking, scientific rigor, scientific logic, the scientific method to any claim. And you may not have the tools with which to assess the claim, but you can figure out what you would need to know in order to assess it, and you can figure out what can't possibly be true, and you can figure out what the assumptions are of the people making the claim, et cetera, et cetera. And that is what we are doing, and we are sharing it with other people so that you all can begin to employ the same kinds of tools and assess things for yourselves. And what the mainstream media, what the think tanks and the mainstream media, who are trying their hardest to maintain the status quo, are doing is saying, look at that. This is dangerous over there. Those people who are talking, it's bad. It's bad stuff what they're doing.
It's the exact flaw is pseudo-quantification. Right? What they want to do is claim that they made a ranking, a numerical ranking, right? So what they've done is they have created the impression that there is something to be counted, and what they did is simply count it. And here's the structure. It's as objective as can be. I mean, look, we've got a bar graph. Right? It's not like we took markers.
Those are digits on it.
Yeah, we asked a spreadsheet to make a bar graph, and it just simply took the number in the cell and translated into a distance on the screen, right? And the point is, yes, but you got it from Snopes. It's fucking Snopes, right? So,
oh my God.
And worse. I kept digging in this thing, and it's not like I read it from end. But hold on. The other thing I noticed, right? It didn't take long to run across the fact that this is somehow borrowing from Data and Society. You remember Data and Society? Mm-hmm. Here's my recollection of Data and Society. Back in the early days of the so-called IDW, Data and Society reported that the IDW was far right, their term. Now, the funny thing was that a lot of us looked at this and said, wait a second. Of the named people in the IDW, more than half are left-wing. What that means is that this report...
Well, and somewhere in here, and I'm not finding it at the moment, they rank a bunch of podcasts in terms of their political leanings. And they have us as conservative.
They have us as... Well, but that's just the point. Yeah. So the report itself is guilty of egregious misinformation. It is guilty of partnering with people who have a history of spreading misinformation about us. None of this is apparently of a concern, though, to the Brookings Institution, because their real purpose is a bar graph that makes it look as if something countable makes us unreliable, which is, of course, not true, right? This is really a question of keeping people inside of a mental prison.
Yes.
The point is, what they don't want is for you to start listening to voices who have been correct about things. And the reason that you're not going to listen to them is because as you are told that actually this person got this right, you will read, oh, no, they get things wrong all the time. It must be a rare case of them being right. It's utter nonsense, right? It's the same attack as calling us gurus, right? Yeah. The idea is, oh, if you listen to them, you're a sucker, right? Oh, if you listen to the DarkHorse podcast, you are absorbing misinformation. And if you don't know that, that's because you haven't done the hard work of going to Snopes or whatever, right? I mean, it couldn't be more muppety. This is childish, right? If a college student came up with a method this bad, you would sit them down and you would gently say, I understand what you're trying to do. Here's why that doesn't work, right?
So yes, and at risk of getting into like the weeds that was Evergreen, students took full-time programs, 16 credit programs, and you gave them narrative evaluations. And you could, and sometimes in order to apply to grad school and such, there was a method by which you could turn those narrative evaluations into grades so that they could calculate a GPA. But there weren't grades. But what that meant was that if a student did fail to do any work at all, or the work was so absurdly missing anything of value, what I did was, with compassion, with full respect for the human on the other side of the interaction, would say, I'm not writing you a narrative evaluation for this part of the program. You just don't get any credit at all. This disappears from your record, and that's a gift. You should go back to zero and start over, because this thing isn't any good. It's terrible.
It's terrible. And so the point is, in college, you might write a report. The purpose of the report you write in college is not to make it into the world and inform people about things. It's to train you to write a report that actually has some content in it. Here's a bunch of people who should have failed at the college level and either gone back and learned how to do this properly, or they shouldn't be doing it at all in public because they don't understand how to do it. Now, the real question is there actually an intent inside the Brookings Institution or Data and Society or the New York Times to actually report things that are real, and are they fucking it up this badly? Or is that not the point? Is the point pure politics? Is the point to keep people subscribed to the same bad compromised channels of information because the idea is to feed them bad information in the future, and you can't do that if they have an alternative? Let's just be honest. If the question was...
We have been.
Of course.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying, like,
honest.
Can we... Hold that thought. I would like to take this opportunity to invite the staff at the Brookings Institute and the New York Times and all the rest of you guys to be honest. Let's be honest. Start now.
Yeah, start. It would be good.
Yeah.
I would be less resentful of our New York Times subscription if you started being honest now.
Yeah.
But, let us be honest about the score here, okay? At a logical level, this is as stupid as a report could be. It is an exercise in pseudo-quantification. It is hilarious that when you get to the methods, you find Snopes, PolitiFact, and some dictionary that they don't share, right? That is not a method. That's garbage, okay? They still win. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Because most people will be scared away from podcasts like this one by the implication that somebody has done a scientific study and decided that we are saying untrue things. So this is absolutely cheating. What they're doing is, instead of pointing to a thing, the spike protein made by the vaccines is cytotoxic, right? That is a factual claim that I made, or Robert Malone made. I can't remember which one of us made it in that podcast. Yeah. We were fact-checked, I think, by PolitiFact, who said that's false. And then it turned out to be true, of course, because logically speaking, it makes sense that because the spike protein of the coronavirus is cytotoxic and the spike protein made by the vaccines is much more like that spike protein than it is different, and there's no reason to think its differences render it non-toxic, right? It was a logical thing to say. But the point is, they don't want to have that discussion because they will lose. Right? Where we have gotten stuff wrong, we have corrected it. It's not a win for them. There's no accusation to be leveled. What they want to do instead is pretend that actually there is a volume of information, that they have gone through it and they have discovered a pattern of being factually incorrect without having...
So hard.
Right. Now, the funny thing is that we actually had, you at one point on our podcast said that we needed better skeptics. Folks decided to take up that challenge, and they actually went through transcripts of our podcasts. They solicited from our critics indicators of where in those transcripts we had said something that was incorrect, and then they went and evaluated those claims, and they did not find this pattern. They found a few very minor places, but in general, they found that all the things that people were saying were false were not in fact false.
Right.
So if done by some reasonable method, it comes out entirely differently. But the real point is the bar graph, the imprimatur on the New York Times, the imprimatur on the Brookings Institution, all of those things are designed to scare people away from things that they have no mechanism for directly challenging.